Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Salutations.
If you've got a tip for Melissa, a fascinating murder story that no one's heard of, an unsolved case you might want to know something about, how Lobo ever got a record deal, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host, grinning disturbingly every time she hears the words autopsy photos, Melissa Morgan.
And more cowbell. Oh, my beloved producer, Mark, I am so dastardly into autopsy photos, I can't even tell you. I wish I had like a scrapbook of autopsy photos.
It's kind of scary.
Oh, my goodness. I have a lot of books that have like small sections of pictures, autopsy photos. Hearing what goes into an autopsy is, you know, everyone knows about the Y cut, basically, because you've probably all watched episodes of CSI or some bullshit. So it's, you know, start at the groin. Oh, sorry. What is that, wrong?
Or some bullshit.
Or some bullshit.
Yeah.
Start at the groin, go up, and then it goes off to either side so they can open up, like peel your skin back and crack your sternum and your ribs to get your organs out, to weigh them. It's so fascinating. I just love it. Autopsy photos are, sorry.
Yeah,
fascinated by the human body.
I just hear that, and I just don't want to, and not you.
Understood.
She's like, good night, honey. Oh, wait, look at this. She shows me her phone. It's like some horrible thing. It's like, and I just kind of, I lay in bed now staring at the ceiling.
Like you can't sleep, and I turn over, good night.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's how I soothe myself to sleep, with autopsy photos. I am fascinated by the human body. Always have been. You know, what happens when we're still in it, and what happens when we, you know, if you believe in a hereafter, what happens when our soul leaves and this is just a shell. I'm fascinated by how the shell moves and works, and you know, I teach yoga. I know, a small section of anatomy. You have to know that kind of stuff to get your, you know, yoga teaching certificate.
Sure.
It's important to know how the body moves. Some of the most fascinating workshops I've taken have been anatomy workshops. One of the more fascinating was last November. For those people in the know, yoga instructors or people interested in anatomy, a man named Gil Headley is the head of a teaching hospital in Florida. And he, you know, has gotten several people to donate their body to science, to his private program, so he can teach medical students how the body works. And he is fascinated by something called fascia, which is what holds the muscle to the bone. And that workshop last November was amazing. He showed us a male and a female. These were all through slides. We didn't see the actual bodies. They were back at his lab in Florida. But the fascia, it kind of looks like a gold color. And that's where most of the tightness in our muscles comes from. It's not actually usually a musculature thing. It's the connective tissue that holds the muscle to the bone. And so if we sit for a long time in a certain way, if we move habitual moving patterns, our body is such a great, amazing healing machine and wants to be in alignment. It, you know, overcompensates for things. So he told us this amazing story, and I know no one gives a shit, but just hang with me. It's short. He had a body on the table, and it, you know, was the skin was peeled back. And he went to the hospital cafeteria to get something to drink for like 20 minutes and comes back, and the fascia, the overhead lights over, you know, the surgical lights, very, very bright, very, very strong, had sort of baked the fascia. So the fascia, instead of being pliable and movable, having been exposed to this bright light, had become a deeper gold brown and crusty for lack of a better term. It was fascinating.
Oh, gross.
Sorry, I know. But it's incredible. He showed, the person's like skin is sort of peeled back, and he took the foot and bent the knee so we could see how everything works. It was just, anyway, who started this conversation?
I think I did, but
Mark, it's your fault. Stop it.
It's still it is fascinating.
It is to me. I'm fascinated by the human body. And this episode of Just the Tip-Sters, I think is fascinating because the body can tell some stories after, it has been quieted forever, the eternal sleep. And unless somebody's paying attention, some of those messages can be shuffled like a shell game, and you could perhaps get an incorrect manner of death, which almost happened here. So this is the story of the writer, director, and has a small part in her own film, Waitress, the death of Adrienne Shelly. If you saw her, if you have a television at all, if you've ever seen a movie at all, you would be like, oh yeah, I know her. Petite little woman, lovely girl. I'm just going to be honest. The film Waitress just seriously gets on my last nerve. Perhaps it's because I am from the South and I find it a really trite portrayal of Southern characters. And and this is a terrible thing to say. And you know what? I don't care. It's my podcast and I can say what I want to. God damn it. If you want to review shitty independent films, get your own fucking podcast. So the film Waitress just annoyed the fuck out of me from minute one. And it has every single thing going for it. And I'm a big fan of small independent films. They typically have some of the more fascinating portrayals, some, acting that you don't see in large big budget films where someone is having to emote next to a green screen. I really enjoy a small story, but it's got to be a good one. And it has to be maybe something a little different. And Waitress is just like, it's like a small, crappy version of Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. It's so goddamn boring. Anyway, so a small synopsis, the film Waitress, again, has everything going for it. Mark saw a clip and said, oh, was filmed right, like 5 miles from our house at a place called not the way station, Halfway House. An old, was probably once a house. Looks like it's from the Old West. And it's just filmed on the outside, the Halfway House, because they found a diner that looks much better on the inside. The Halfway House on the inside, you walk in, you're like, oh my God, do I need to call the health department right now? And the worst part, they don't accept American Express. You know why? Because they're fuckers. Because they're cheap fuckers. That's all I'm saying.
Somebody should point out here that Melissa just bought 2 first-class tickets using American Express points. We kind of like it.
I really like American Express. I understand it's a much higher fee for vendors, but it's a really good thing for consumers. Anyway, back to Waitress.
We were not paid to say that.
I do not work for American Express. They don't know who I am. They don't care. But I am happy with their point system and the things we have been able to do with it, because we try to put everything on it that we can. Anyway, back to Waitress. So it's got Carrie Russell, who was Felicity. And just recently, in the 5 years running show, really highly touted critically, The Americans. It has Andy Griffith as the crotchety old man from the South. It has Nathan Fillion as her new gynecologist, from Firefly and from One Life to Live. Oh my God, I'm so dating myself right now. That does not mean I'm taking myself out for a date. It means I'm saying that I'm 107 years old. It has Adrienne Shelly plays a small role with the worst Southern accent I've ever heard anyone from upstate New York do. It's real bad. It has Cheryl Hines from Curb Your Enthusiasm. So I mean, it's got legs, but it's still this awful little story. of a woman in the South, abusive husband, played by Jeremy Sisto, who's wasted because he's so good at being awful and creepy. Awful abusive husband, a waitress at a, Joe's Pie Diner, which, I mean, Joe's Pie Diner? What does that even mean? I mean, could you be more narrow casted? And yet somehow Andy Griffith, we're supposed to believe that he's Joe, and he came up with Joe's Pie Diner like in 1947, and it's been this successful diner since then. Joe's Pie Diner, not Joe's Diner, where she comes up with inventive names for pies. Joe's Pie Diner. That's just one stellar point to this. So anyway, she's like the avant-garde artist of pies. So when something happens in her life, she bases a pie around it, and she comes up with sorry, just such an awful, it's such a boring movie. She comes up with savory pies and dessert pies, and it's just bad. And she finds out she's pregnant, goes to her doctor, who's been her doctor since he was started as her pediatrician, and then dabbles in gynecology as she gets older. I don't know how this works. It's awful. And Nathan Fillion is the new doctor in town because her doctor retired. I'm sure he couldn't, go from being a pediatrician to a gynecologist without some sort of an oversight committee checking out his credentials. Just awful. This movie is awful. And she has an affair with Nathan Fillion, who's, by the way, is married. And the only reason he's the hot new doctor in town is because his wife is completing her residency at a local hospital, and he placated her by, moving to town to take over, moving to tiny Shittsville, American South. It's literally...
Sounds like a soap opera.
Oh, dear God, it's awful. No, and it's funny. Not at all. Not at all. So it's supposed to be this cute little heartwarming small story. And it is, but not so heartwarming. You end up sort of hating everyone and the whole goddamn thing. And it's so, you have to suspend your disbelief, which is typically not something you have to do with a small film. At least in my mind, that's what I love about small indie films, is that I can just get there and be there fully and completely buy in, because it's more human, typically more human stories. This is just bad, like BADD bad. So, she gets pregnant, goes to the doctor. They have an affair, blah, blah, blah. She comes home and makes a new creation called the Bad Baby Pie. It's got ham and cheese in it. Anyway, I know. God.
It was written by our poor murder victim.
I know, and God bless her. And that's another thing. This is all complete conjecture, but I feel like this film has found even more sturdy legs because of what happened to her. I feel like if what happened to her hadn't happened, this would have just faded into the background, and we would be like, what's Waitress? But no, we can't have that now because it's just in the American zeitgeist, much to my horror and dismay. So let's see. Our heroine, Jenna, wants to enter a pie contest to win $25,000 so she can get away from her shitty husband, but her husband won't let her enter it. Wah, wah. Joe of Joe's Pie Diner, Andy Griffith, crotchety old man who's her boss and her regular customer. I don't know how that works. Does he pay himself? I don't know why they're calling him her customer, because he owns the goddamn place. You would think he'd get his fucking stupid pies for free. And you would think he could change the name.
Well,
so anyway,
I'm sure that if people heard some dialogue from the movie, they would say, "Oh, well, it's great dialogue. It all makes sense."
Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that in just a minute, and you'll get to see why I love this movie with all my heart and soul, if I had one. So, she goes to give birth to her daughter, and she finds out that Andy Griffith / Joe is in the same hospital that she is. And he had given her a note before she went into, he'd given her an envelope before she went into labor. And she opens it up, and it's a letter from him, a sketch of her. He didn't really ever show himself as an artist, the character of Grouchy Joe, the pie diner owner, and $270,000, and says, "Get away from your husband." So I guess, I don't know, Joe kicks it, and she tells her husband to take a fucking hike, and she renames it Lulu's Pie Diner. God damn it, is everyone in this fucking movie retarded? Just like legit retarded. So, as we sit, a mile and a half from something called the Pie Tin. Anyway, she renames it her daughter's name is Lulu, renames it Lulu's Pie fucking stupid diner, but fucking is spelled with a PH. And
think that part was in the movie.
Stupid is spelled with two O's. Sometimes I embellish. And then the movie closes with spoiler alert. Movie closes with her and Lulu walking home holding hands. So anyway, back to poor Adrienne Shelly. She is married. Her husband is a partner in a PR firm. She has a daughter that's maybe 2. She is, a child actor. She, born and raised in New York, did a lot of stage performing. She was, she got the lead in Annie in her high school in Jericho, New York. She went to Boston University. She majored in film production, but she dropped out in her junior year and moved back to New York. She, she's tiny, petite, and she calls herself an optimistic agnostic. And I will tell you that she has also been called like a hard ass. And sometimes the little tiny people, she works on, Law and Order and all the shows that are filmed in New York. Oz, Homicide, Life on the Street, does a lot of stage work. Apparently her, when you're a tough little cookie, maybe you have to be a tough little cookie to get ahead in a male dominated business. And she wanted to be behind the camera, which is what happened here. She apparently had her career breakthrough as an actress when she was cast by Hal Hartley, independent filmmaker, in something called The Unbelievable Truth in 1989, and then something called Trust in 1990. So a lot of her films, a lot of her work is either nominated or wins awards in these very small, cliquish, film festivals like the Newport Film Festival and shit like that. So Trust was nominated for the Grand Jury Prize at the Sundance Film Festival. And Hal Hartley's script tied for the Waldo Salt Screenwriting Award. Trust tied with that huge hit, Hanging with the Homeboys. So
for the big Waldo what?
Waldo Salt Screenwriting Award. Now, Waldo Salt wrote, Coming Home and Midnight Cowboy.
Big difference. Okay. Yeah, not Coming to America.
No, Coming Home.
Okay.
And which, really good film.
Awesome film.
Really good film. And Midnight Cowboy.
Awesome film.
Considered, a classic masterpiece. And I bet he wasn't at all spinning in his grave when he found out that the two films that tied in the 1990 Sundance, his name screenwriting award for the Grand Jury Prize was Trust and Hanging with the Homeboys. So anywho, Jesus Christ on a crutch. Adrienne Shelly writes, directs, produces, and co-stars in Waitress. And it had been accepted into Sundance. And she, in 2006, she knew it was going to be accepted into Sundance. She'd gotten the acceptance letter, which is typically in January. So in November, I apologize. January of 2007 is when it would have premiered at the Sundance Film Festival. In November of 2006, she has a apartment in Manhattan's West Village that she uses as an office. So she's writing and working on another screenplay because she's, finished Waitress, her coup de grace. And before I get to what happens, I will. Here's why Waitress was not nominated for the Waldo Salt Screenwriting Award because of dialogue like this. Can you hit it, Producer Mark?
You gonna tell him?
Not sure. If my plan comes true and I can make my big escape from him in a couple months, maybe he never even has to know.
Are you sure it's his child?
You know everything I do. I ain't never cheated. I'd never do that.
I feel sorry for you, Jenna. I mean, I'd do anything to meet a man, and Becky's husband is a senile fruitcake.
Dawn!
Well, I'm sorry, it's true. But now here you are, married to this handsome guy.
Who's got very good hair.
He's got very good hair. And pregnant with a little girl.
How do you know it's a girl?
We don't know it's a girl.
But neither of us would trade places with you for 1 second, now would we, Becky?
No, we wouldn't, Dawn. No, we wouldn't. Except, just once in my life, I'd like to be able to make a pie half as good as Jenna can make a pie.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, come on. So if I can make a decent pie, who cares?
Look at this, Jenna. As you can plainly see, my right boob is much higher than my left boob, and Dawn here has pasty skin. I'm stuck in a marriage to drool and Phil, the invalid, and Dawn eats TV dinners alone, but still, we wouldn't rather be you.
I do have pasty skin.
Yeah, I know you're here.
See you tomorrow, honey.
Good luck. And if you do tell him that...
Hey.
Hiya there, Earl. We all just agreed that your hair is super attractive. Hooray for you! Woohoo!
I just wish someone would jam something sharp into my ears right now.
That was
Hard to get through, huh?
oh
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm from Independence, Kentucky. And while I have several words in my lexicon that trip me up, most people don't say, "Are you from Independence, Kentucky?" It's not like it's that regional of an accent. But here are 3 women who speak the Queen's English: Adrienne Shelly, Carrie Russell, and Cheryl Hines, who speak beautifully. And I don't know if none of them could afford a dialect coach, but I'm where I'm from, no one's ever said, "Pay." It sounds like Eric Cartman. I wish I could make pies like you make pay. No one speaks like that. No one speaks like that.
Well, maybe some people.
Pay. No.
Shall we speak kindly of the dead?
Look, sorry. I know. I'm telling. Except that it makes me angry that I feel like this.
Oh my.
Okay. So anyway.
Okay.
So, okay. I do feel bad. So she's working on her next screenplay, which please God, don't let it be called like Waiter. Or I will kill myself and I will find her in the afterlife and push hard on her larynx if it's something like that. So November 1st of 2006, her husband, Andy Ostroy, is like, she hasn't called all day. She's in her office working and I don't know what's happening. So at about 5:45, he shows up and there's a doorman at the, the West Village part of Manhattan in her fancy ass apartment for her office. And he says to the doorman, "You need to come upstairs with me. I can't get a hold of her and I don't know what's happening." So they get into the apartment and they find her hanging from the shower rod in the bathroom, and there's a bed sheet around her neck. So despite that the door was not locked, even though he had the doorman come up with him, and there's money reportedly missing from her wallet, the New York City Police Department is like, "Oh no, she committed suicide. It's clear. Look, she's hanging from the shower rod." Well, sure, she's 5 foot tall and weighs 90 pounds. She did that herself. So an autopsy said that she had died as the result of a neck compression from hanging. Her husband's like, "Look, we are happy in our marriage. She has everything to live for. Her movie was just accepted to Sundance. It's going to give Hanging with the Homeboys a run for the Waldo Salt." No, it's not even close. She has a daughter. She is very happy. She did not commit suicide. She didn't leave a note. She would never do this. Their daughter's 2.5. She would never do this. So he kept protesting, which is, another, kind of a cautionary tale. Whatever you have to do, if something looks staged to you, if a family member, a friend, anything looks weird to you, keep fighting. Because, her husband, Andy, kept, protesting, look, she wouldn't do this. She wouldn't do this. So 6 days later, they find a sneaker print on top of the toilet in the gypsum dust right next to where her body's found. They print the sneaker print, and it's matched to other sneaker prints around the building because there was construction work going on the day of her death. So November 6th of 2006, they arrest a 19-year-old construction worker, Diego Pilco, and he's an Ecuadorian illegal immigrant. So he confesses on tape to attacking Shelly, who's very tiny, and then staging the fake suicide by hanging her from the shower curtain. And his original version of what happened was that Shelly said, "Can you keep the noise down?" And he threw a hammer at her. And he was afraid that she would make a complaint and he would lose his job and then be deported because he's an illegal immigrant who's working in Manhattan. He has a job. So he follows her back to her apartment. She's 40. She's tiny. And his first statement is that, she died because we were struggling and she fell. She fell on her neck. And
right.
And the floor wrapped around her neck and choked her, or I did. So he changes his story the second time that he's interviewed, and he says that while he was on a break, he had noticed that she was returning to her apartment and he followed her. After assaulting her and rendering her unconscious, he killed her by staging the fake suicide. So the second version is actually more consistent with the lack of dust on the bottom of her shoes, and she was not wearing shoes when she was found hanging. And it seemed to be more of a confession to murder as opposed to, an accidental, manslaughter, like, oh my God, I threw a hammer at her and I didn't want to go back to Ecuador because I'm a pile of shit. So, prosecutors thought, okay, the second story, a jury might find him guilty of a lesser charge. If he returned to the first story. They believed the second story, that he just, was a hunter, followed her back to her apartment and, probably raped her and killed her. And they said, if he returns to the first story, that it was, an accident, sort of, except he, whatever. They think that a jury could find him guilty of a lesser charge. So they filed charges. He pleads guilty to first-degree manslaughter and was sentenced to 25 years in prison without parole. The medical examiner determined that she was still alive when she was hanged, which is just terrible. Just awful. Just absolutely awful. So at Diego Pilco's sentencing on March 13th of 2008, Shelly's husband, Andy Ostroy, along with other family members, said that, of course, they would never forgive him. You're nothing more than a cold-blooded killer, is what Andy Ostroy said, and he hoped he would rot in jail. So he might have actually needed some help writing a script, too, because, you're a cold-blooded killer, and I hope you rot in jail. Come on, Andy. Shit. You got to say something. Anyway, in remembering his wife, he said, Adrienne was the kindest, warmest, most loving, generous person I knew. She was incredibly smart, funny, and talented. A bright light with an infectious laugh and a huge smile that radiated inner and outer beauty. She was my best friend and the person with whom I was supposed to grow old. And that, I'm sure, is how he felt about her and loved her. It just, I don't know. I feel like not everyone has to be Michael Peterson and write like a flowery poem. I whisper Kathleen's name on my heart or something. But Andy should have gotten some help writing some nice stuff about his wife. Anyway, so Andy ends up filing a lawsuit against the company that employed Diego Pilco. So he said that even after 8 months, he still owed $12,000 debt to be paid to the coyote who smuggled him into the U.S. And he lived in the basement of a...
Oh, this is the defendant saying this.
Yes. I'm sorry, Diego Pilco. I thought I said that. Are you not paying attention?
Oh, I am. I'm.
No, you're not.
Yeah.
According to the defendant, Diego Pilco... How's that, Producer Mark? Do you got that now?
Yes.
Testing? Can you hear me?
I got it.
Is this on?
Yes.
Hey, hello?
Yes. Hello.
Okay. So he still owed $12,000 to be paid to his coyote for being smuggled into the U.S. And he lived in the basement of a building that was owned by the employer, the company, Bradford General Contractors. So one of Shelley's neighbors in the building that was just her office said that Pilco stared at her in the laundry room, made her feel really uncomfortable when she walked past him. You know, that's just hearsay. But so Shelley's husband, Andy, sues Bradford General Contractors because they hired Pilco, an illegal immigrant. And the complaint alleged that Shelley would still be alive if the contracting firm had not hired him. And he sought to hold the owners and management of the building liable for Shelley's murder. According to the New York Post, other allegations that he files said that, you know, Pilco was an undocumented immigrant, so were most of his coworkers. If Bradford General Contractors' interest is to not have police and immigration officials called to the job site, that's their problem, and they should hire people who are legal, because if the police show up, then, you know, obviously all of their work grinds to a halt. So on July 7th of 2011, the lawsuit is dismissed by Judge Lewis York. The court determined that Ostroy had not really established legal grounds to hold the contractor liable, writing, "While this court sympathizes with Mr. Ostroy's loss, plaintiffs have not presented sufficient legal grounds upon which to hold Bradford Contracting liable for Pilco's vicious crime, and that there's other insufficient evidence is presented to find out that either the building's management agents or its owners had reason to believe that Pilco was a dangerous person who should not have been allowed to work on the premises. So, you know, they're not going to be held vicariously liable."
Wow, that's surprising.
I actually didn't think it's surprising at all. I think they should have been fined or something for hiring people that are illegal, but I don't know how you could actually, I understand how and why he filed the lawsuit. In this instance, I don't know how a judge could have found, perhaps, is it a civil suit, you think? It sounds to me like...
That was a civil... Obviously, this is a civil suit. This sounds like it was a civil suit. He sued.
Here's the other thing. Yeah. Can you appeal a civil suit?
Yeah.
Okay. Because Andy Ostroy, as of this date, is still saying he's considering an appeal. Now, it's been, 7 years since the judgment was handed down.
Well, it's probably too late then now.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So I don't know. It doesn't say it was a civil lawsuit, but that's what I assumed it was.
Sure. No, it has to be.
Okay.
They went up. More I think about it, I guess, the fact that he was an illegal immigrant isn't really necessarily tied to the fact that he killed her. I mean, it's so. I guess if the company had been hiring known convicted felons,
right,
violent felons, that would be one thing.
Yeah, but he didn't have a history because he was, he had no history here in this country.
Yeah, I guess I can see that. I guess I can see it.
19 years old, and quite frankly, his age and perhaps his not understanding of the American legal system. He'd been in the country 8 months. I think if he had not, confessed after they matched his tennis shoe print in dust after 5 days, if he hadn't confessed, I think it would have just gone down as while she had everything to live for, she hung herself on a shower rod.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, if he hadn't confessed, honest to God, because no one was paying attention.
Yeah.
You know what? Maybe the cops had seen like an early screening of Waitress, and they're like, "Oh, I know why she killed herself."
Oh,
I'm sorry.
And now it's been made into a musical.
Well, that's what I was going to get to.
Oh.
I can't even believe this, but it is a musical on Broadway. It has been turned into a musical, Waitress, the musical. It's based on, the film written by Adrienne Shelly. It opened August 1st of 2015 at the American Repertory Theater. Get it? Art, A-R-T, at Harvard University. It's got a book by Jessie Nelson, music and lyrics by Sarah Bareilles, who is, the it girl. The star is Jessie Mueller, who won a Tony Award for her portrayal of Carole King in the music Beautiful. It sold out a limited engagement and then moved to Broadway in March of 2016. Dear God. The only thing I can imagine worse than Waitress the Musical is Waitress the Musical on ice.
That might be next.
I'm not kidding. I swear to God, she got more press out of dying than she could ever have in her, career. I am not kidding.
We're all going to hell for this episode.
We're not going to hell. If it's anyone, it's just me. You didn't say anything bad, and I don't care what you say because
I'm laughing.
It's dismal. It's dismal and awful. So I have a hard time with reviewers. Several movies I thought were stellar were given, meh. And several films I thought were piles of shit are, 1,000% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. So this, I can't even believe this, but...
You are en fuego tonight, my dear.
Sorry. I'm just angry at the portrayal of the South, and it's just a bad film. It's not a good film. It is not. It's mediocre at best, and it should have just gone. It should have been released, had whatever success it had, and just... went gentle into that good night, motherfucker. Go away and stop portraying people from the South as, I make pee. I like pee. No one speaks like this. Okay, sorry. So the only review I found that I agreed with, and like I said, it had all the makings, a great cast and an awful script and Andy Griffith. Anyway, so from the AV Club, which is part of The Onion, which I love with all of my heart and soul, a review on the AV Club said, it literally spoke my soul. It would be tempting to compare the setting and ditzy sidekick, tough-talking blonde, soulful lead dynamic unfavorably to Martin Scorsese's Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, if it even aspired to go that high. With its snappy dialogue and broad characters, it's closer in spirit to the TV spinoff Alice. Still, there's much to offset the shortcomings. He's just trying to be nice. Particularly nice performances from Russell and Fillion, and a rare welcome role from Andy Griffith as the diner's gruff owner, Joe, even if he's largely there to set up a finale that cheats much of what's come before. It's an imperfect film, but it's the kind of imperfect film of which it would be nice to have Shelley make more. Now, I guarantee you this reviewer was pulling his punches because she was murdered in an awful way at the worst time when things were going well in her life. But I'm telling you, it's dismal. It's a really bad film, and now it's a really bad musical, and I hope it goes to, being Waitress the Musical on ice. That is my only hope, is from now on that it actually goes to being on ice. So the part that is, I hate, I feel like a monster saying the things I've said, especially about, it becoming a musical and, dear God. But there is, I promise to end this on a positive note because there are some, very sweet things. So, important things that happened from her awful, awful demise. So following Adrienne Shelly's death, Andy Ostroy established the Adrienne Shelly Foundation. It's a nonprofit organization that awards scholarships, production grants, finishing funds, and even living stipends through its partnerships with academic and filmmaking institutions like NYU, Columbia University, Women in Film, IFP, AFI, even the Sundance Institute. One of the grants recipients, Cynthia Wade, won an Academy Award in 2008 for Freeheld, a short subject documentary about the foundation that helped fund it. And as part of its annual awards, the Women in Film Critics Circle gave Adrienne Shelly an award for a film that most passionately opposes violence against women. Yeah. So on February of 2007, NBC actually developed a episode of Law & Order based on her life and death called Melting Pot. And it was sort of a thinly veiled dramatization of her murder because she had guest starred on Law & Order in 2000. So there are some lovely things that have come out of it. This nonprofit organization that helps, women make films, be artists. I know that would make her happy. And I'm not saying that, she should have been murdered. I'm just saying maybe if Diego Pilco had just maybe cold cocked her, maybe he would have just knocked into her, Adrienne, go back to acting, because Waitress is bad. And more cowbell. I'm going to hell.
And nobody's going to hell, especially if you call the Tipster hotline at 832-847-7837 or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com.